Standing armies is a topic that to the Founding Fathers was very, very important. A standing army was against liberty. A standing army was against basically the people. A standing army was a reason for oppression. So it went from George Washington, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, George Mason, plus many, many others. I'm going to read some quotes and some things about the Founding Fathers and what they thought about standing armies. The Virginia Declaration of Rights stated that a well-regulated militia comprised of the body of the people, trained in arms, is proper, natural, and in self-defense of a free state, that standing armies in times of peace should be avoided as dangerous to liberty, and that in all cases the military should be under strict subordination and governed by a civil power. Samuel Adams in 1776 said a professional army was always dangerous to the liberty of the people. Armies were held to be nurseries of vice, dangerous, and the grand engine of despotism. That was from Samuel Adams. James Madison wrote that the immense costs necessary to raise and maintain a standing army, money required for pay, for uniforms, rations, weapons, pensions, and so forth, would be a burden on the populace, with the immense and crippling tax burden that would require government to confiscate more and more of a citizen's wealth in order to keep those massive expenses. Other members of the founding generation worried that an armed professional force represented an unalienable threat to the liberty of the people. James Madison also wrote that a standing military force with overgrown executive will not be safe companions to liberty. Also, James Madison wrote, of all the enemies to the public liberty, war is perhaps the most dreaded because it compromises and develops the germ of every other. War is the parent of armies. From those proceed debts and taxes, and armies and debts and taxes are known instruments for bringing the many under the domination of the few. In war, too, discretionary power of the executive is extended. Its influence in dealing out offices, honors, involvements, annulments is multiplied, and all the means of seducing the minds are added to those of subduing the force of the people. The same malignant aspect of republicanism may be traced to the inequality of the fortunes and of the opportunities of fraud, growing out of a state of war, and in the degeneracy of manners and of morals endangered by both. No nation could preserve its freedom in the midst of continual warfare. A standing army to Jefferson was an engine of oppression. In the first case, Julius Caesar marched his provisional army to Rome, overthrowing the power of the Senate, destroying the Republic, and laying the foundation of empire. This was a quote that Madison was talking about when he said that Rome and their need for standing armies was a threat to democracy. Also, Oliver Cromwell in England used the army to abolish the parliament and rule as a dictator. There are many, many cases where standing armies is seen as a detriment to liberty. The British Crown had forced the American colonists to quarter and otherwise support its troops, which the colonies saw as nothing more than an army of occupation. George Mason exclaimed, "What havoc, desolation, and destruction have been perpetrated by standing armies." In the Constitution, it basically says to raise and support an army is a power of Congress, but no appropriation of money that shall use will be for longer than a term of 2 years. So you can't appropriate longer than 2 years, and many founding fathers felt that it should be 1 year or less. James Madison, on a finer point, said, "No man has greater regard for the military gentlemen than I have. I admire their integrity, their perseverance, their valor. But once a standing army is established in any country, the people lose their liberty. When against a regular and disciplined army, yeomanry are the only defense, yeomanry unskilled and unarmed, what a chance is there for preserving freedom? Give me leave to recur to the page of history, to warn you of the present danger. Recollect the history of most nations of the world. What havoc, desolation, and destruction have been perpetuated by armies." That was from George Mason. In Federalist Paper 29, Alexander Hamilton echoes many of Mason's warnings against the standing army. James Madison, a standing army is one of the greatest mischief that can possibly happen. Elbridge Gerry, vice president under Madison, said standing armies a bane of liberty. Throughout the founding fathers of our country, throughout our early history, standing armies was the main problem to liberty. How the founding fathers thought to offset the standing armies was a militia. State militias comprised of individuals 18 years or older to 45, that would be called on to defend the country, defend the state, defend the person. The militia would be opposite of the standing armies. The militia would be used to defend and put down rebellions. So this is very interesting about standing armies. We don't talk about enough in history, and if the Founding Fathers saw our military of over 1.5 million, reserves of another million, and our standing army, and then they'll notice that we've had perpetual wars. The executive is growing stronger and stronger. Many of the concerns of the Founding Fathers are actually seen when you look at standing armies, the power of the executive. Now, have we had the same decrease in liberty? Have we had our rights going down and down? It's one to argue. It's one to think about. So when I put this to everybody to think about standing armies, think about the right of militias, think about the strength of the executive. Is this what the Founding Fathers would have wanted? Or is this what is necessary and proper in today's day? Is this where a living document, a living constitution grows, where the power of the executive grows based on the needs of a larger and larger country, a country that is now 335 million people, a country that is now the only one superpower of the world? What would the Founding Fathers say about this, where the United States has surpassed England as the superpower of the world?